that he's been given, the consultations that he's been holding with all the states, and also the way in which the decisions of the council towards revenue generation are necessary for him to understand, also because the entire formulation for devolution is also going to be derived from the revenue generation and so on. So although he is not talking about specific numbers, his presentation really put threw a lot of light on matters relating to devolution. Post his presentation, there was also a bit of a discussion about the presentation that he did. Many states participated, and actually that itself ran till about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And post his presentation, there were a couple of the agenda points taken up, and we broke out for lunch, came back and resumed, and we've just concluded. So some of the decisions, in fact, even as we read it out, we would realize are those which have been waiting for a long time, and they have been resolved. And let me happily say, being here in Goa, many of the decisions are driven by the broader principle, and I take the example of tourism, broader principle of promotion of tourism, about which Prime Minister has also spoken from the Red Fort, and not just this summer, this August, but even during his last tenure as Prime Minister of this country. So for promotion of tourism, if we had taken that argument, some of the decisions, not one, not just one, but several of the decisions, a few of the decisions would link to promotion of tourism. So it would A, B, C, couple of items relate to that head. Like that, broader thumb rules of making the economy a lot more vibrant through better taxation, simplification of taxation, and rationalization of tax rates have governed this particular GST Council's meeting. And as a result, we've realized that we could arrive at conclusions on many of these rate-related matters. Other than that, they've also been a clear suggestion that the GOMs, about 4 of them which are in existence, should fairly quickly meet, because they have had their meetings delayed for genuine considerations. But now the House felt that the GOMs for their respective mandated topics should meet at the earliest and come to some kind of a quick resolution of those issues which are posed to them. So if I were to look at the broader issues, we've spoken up on the issues related to rates which came through the fitment committees. We've spoken about larger simplification of rates. We've spoken about the GOMs on which there's a call taken that with a time-bound manner they should quickly meet and resolve the issues which have been posed to them. And very clearly on the issues where the committee has to talk about implementation for the convenience of the newer forms and things like that, a call has been taken in favor of greater simplification, clarity, and also if that has been a reason for people to delay compliance, we should take them on board and respond to them. So if this is the broader framework with which what we have spoken about in the councils today, I'm looking at the goods and the recommendations which the council has agreed upon. On the GST rate reductions, I'm listing it out in some random order. There's no particular order in which we are talking. Slide fasteners, the zips as they say, have been reduced from 18 to 12%. Marine fuel, 18 to 5%. 0.5% FO is added there. Then 12 to 5% on wet grinders consisting of stone as a grinder. 5% to nil on dried tamarind, plates and cups made of leaves, flowers, barks, and so on, disposable and bio-friendly. 3% to 0.25% on cut and polished semi-precious stones. Cut and polished semi-precious stones. Applicable rate to 5% on specified goods of petroleum operations undertaken under the Hydrocarbon Exploration Licensing Policy, the HELP, Hydrocarbon Exploration Licensing Policy. There, the applicable rate has been brought to 5% on specified goods for petroleum operations. Then, the exemptions from GST stroke IGST is being given on 1. Imports of specified defense goods not being manufactured indigenously, and this is being extended only up to 2024. Second, supply of goods and services to FIFA, Federation of International Football Associations, I think, and other specified persons for organizing the Under-17 Women's Football World Cup in India. So exemption from GST and IGST is being given to them. Then, supply of goods and services to food and agricultural organization for specified projects in India. That's an exemption also being given for the FAO on supply of goods and services to them. Then I move over to GST rates, which have been recommended to be increased from certain level to certain other level. I'm reading it out. 5% to 12% on goods falling under Chapter 86 of tariff like railway wagons, coaches, rolling stock. And here, this is without refund of accumulated ITC. This is to address the concern of ITC accumulation with suppliers of these goods. So it is a hike from 5 to 12, but that hike is justified and demanded by people who wanted it because they have been accumulating ITC and they are not able to offset the credits that they've acquired, and therefore for their better efficiency and cost competitiveness, this hike has been justified. So it's not a hike without consideration. The next hike is from 18% to 28% plus a 12% compensation cess on caffeinated beverages. I read this again, 18 to 28% plus a 12% compensation cess on caffeinated beverages. I move to measures for export promotion. The GST Council has taken this view that export promotion should be taken up in a big way, and therefore they've provided for exemption from GST and IGST on certain items. They are: 1. At the time of import, on silver or platinum, silver and platinum, by specified nominated agencies. So I'm not combining silver and platinum, but I'm reading it silver, comma, platinum, okay? Next, supply of silver, comma, platinum by specified nominated agency to exporters for exports of jewelry. So these will attract only exemptions from GST and IGST. The next is inclusion of Diamond India Limited, DIL Limited, in the list of nominated agencies eligible for IGST exemption on imports of gold or silver or platinum, so as to supply at nil GST to jewelry exports. So there is this authorized agency called Diamond India Limited, which is now being included as that body which can, among many other nominated agencies which are already in the list, we are adding this Diamond India Limited also as an agency which will be eligible for IGST exemption when they import gold or silver or platinum, so as to supply at nil GST to jewelry export. Again, here clarification, I don't mean to say gold, that you import either gold or platinum. I'm only saying gold, comma, silver, comma, platinum, comma, whichever is applicable. Then the fourth main item that I want to bring in is a uniform GST rate is being applied of 12% on polypropylene, polyethylene woven and non-woven bags and sacks, whether or not laminated, of a kind used for packing of goods, from the present rates of 5 and 12 and 18 respectively for each one of them. I shall read it again. A uniform rate of 12% for polypropylene oblique polyethylene woven and non-woven bags and sacks, whether or not laminated, of a kind used for packing of goods. Their existing rates were 5, 12 and 18 respectively. Now all of them come on 12. The next one is GST concession in certain cases of specific, for a specific period only. We are offering, because there was a extensive demand from fishermen and fishermen related communities, exemption to fish meal for the period 1/7/17 to 30th September 2019, because during that time there was not a clarity, they couldn't collect the tax, and when you had to ask them to remit the tax, they said we were not even aware that we had to collect. There was a confusion. So there was a representation saying we are not against paying, but that period which has gone by between 17 and 18, they hadn't collected the tax, so they said please exempt it, because now if we have to remit, who do we collect it from? In order to give them that facility, and because there was a lack of clarity, although they asked us only till about 2018 December, we have extended till this month, December 19. So from 1/7/17 to 39/19, they will be exempted from the GST. There are doubts as regards taxability of fish meal in view of the interpretational issues, the point that I have explained to you. However, any tax collected for this period shall be required to be deposited. The next one is 12% GST during the period 1/7/2017 to 31/12/2018, December of 18, on pulleys, wheels and other parts, all falling under the 8483, the first 4 digits category, and used as parts of agricultural machinery. Should I repeat this again? 12% GST during the period 1/7/2017 to 31/12/2018 on pulley, wheels and other parts falling under 8483 category and used as parts of agricultural machinery. I move over to the next. Passenger vehicles of engine capacity 1500 cc in case of diesel, 1200 cc in case of petrol, and length not exceeding 4000 mm, designed for carrying up to 9 persons, attract a compensation cess of 1% for petrol, 3% for diesel vehicle. That's the prevailing situation. The Council has recommended that the same compensation cess rate for vehicles having these specifications, that is the length and the engine capacity, but designed for carrying more than 10 persons, but up to 13 persons. Presently, these vehicles attract compensation cess at the rate of 15. So they are also being given this facility. The next one is other miscellaneous changes.
So have you cut down the best particular?
Yes. Yes. The next one is other miscellaneous changes. Aerated drink manufacturers shall be excluded from composition scheme. Aerated drinks manufacturers shall no longer be under compensation scheme. Option to pay GST at the rate 18% on transaction value at the time of disposal of specific goods for petroleum operations, on which concessional GST rate of 5% was paid at the time of original supply, provided that the goods are certified by DGH as non-serviceable. So that is the other one which also gets a benefit. Restriction on refund of compensation cess on
tobacco products. That is, in case of inverted duty structure. That is taken up only if there is an inverted duty structure later. Prescribing modalities for allowing concessions on spare parts imported temporarily by foreign airlines for repair of their aircraft while in India in transit in terms of the Chicago Convention on Civil Aviation. Certain other changes of technical nature for the sake of clarity in application of notifications also happened. There were some clarifications issued. I deal with them now. Set of clarifications which are being issued. Clarifications as regards applicability of GST rate in respect of certain goods which have been recommended by the GST Council, among other things, include, first here, mere heating of leguminous vegetables, that is grams, pulses, lentils, just mere heating for removing moisture or to soften them or to puff them up or removing the skin or not subjecting to any other processing or addition of any other ingredients such as salt or oil would be classified under HS code 0713. Clear, or do you want me to read it again? It means each time when value addition is made to agricultural products, they are subject to taxation. Here we are defining what shall not be considered as value addition, and they are these. If you just dry them plain and simple to remove the moisture, or if you want to heat them just because you want to soften them a bit, or you want to puff them up, or you want to just remove skin, these processes will not be considered as value-adding propositions and therefore will not be taxed. But they will all be coming under HS code 0713. However, in this case, adding salt or adding oil will be subjected to. All mechanical sprayers falling under HS code 8424 would attract 12% GST. Again, a clarification being given. Parts like solar evacuation tubes or solar power based devices like solar water heater, solar steam generation systems would be eligible for 5% GST rate. A clarification again is being given. Exclusive parts and accessories suitable for use solely or principally with a medical device falling under 9018, 9019, 9021 or 9022 would fall in respective headings and attract GST at a concessional rate of 12%. Almond milk is classifiable under HS code 2202 990 and attracts GST rate of 18%. Almond milk. Next, imported stores for Navy. Imported stores for Navy would be entitled to exemption from import duty. Including what? Including IGST. So the exemption is not just for the import duty but also for the IGST. And all these rate changes will be effective from 1st October 2019. The detailed narration of this will be given a bit later, but these were just quickly listed. There is also a set of decisions related to services. I finished with goods, I'm telling you services now. I'm speaking about exemptions, changes in GST rates and ITC eligibility criteria, one after the other. We are in Goa, and a very powerful presentation by the Goa's minister, supported by several other ministers, has resulted in something which has gone beyond what the Fitment Committee has recommended. Fitment Committee recommended a certain thing, but we have gone beyond it even within the Council's discussion. There is a rate reduction being offered. The rate reduction on hotel accommodation service is as follows. The transaction value is what I'm going to read out, per unit, per day. So if there is a transaction value per unit per day of 1,000 rupees, of 1,000 rupees or less in the hotel accommodation service area, it will attract nil GST, which is probably existing already. If it is 1,001 rupee, that is about 1,000 rupee, and up to 7,500 rupees, now it will attract 12% only. And anything above 7,500, which is 7,501 onwards, and any more, will attract 18%. So the hotel services have now effectively come under just 3 brackets. And also, the second sort of related issue, to reduce the rate of GST on outdoor catering services, other than in premises, having daily tariff of unit of accommodation of rupees 7,501 and more, from present 18% with ITC, it will now be 5% without ITC. So catering, outdoor catering service, other than that service which happens within the premises, having a daily tariff of unit of accommodation of rupees 7,501 onwards, this is it, 18 has been brought down to 5 without ITC. The rate shall be mandatory for all kinds of catering. Catering in premises with daily tariff of unit of accommodation is rupees 7,501 and above shall remain at 18% with ITC. So catering specifically is what I refer to now. Job work service is the next category, about which there had been a lot of representations. To reduce rate of GST from 5% to 1.5% on supply of job work services in relation to diamonds. I read that again. To reduce, the council has decided to reduce the GST from 5 to 1.5% on supply of job work services in relation to diamonds. Now some of you, if you're wondering if there's a new category being created, no, that's not a new category. It is only keeping in mind the input tax credits and other things, and therefore 1.5 is actually slightly built on. To reduce rate of GST from 18 to 12% on supply of machine job work, such as in engineering industry, except supply of job work in relation to bus body building, which would still remain at 18%. So for engineering industry, it comes down from 18 to 12 on supply of machine job work. But that excludes, and we do not offer it for bus body building, and that remains, bus body building still remains at 18%. Sector-wise exemptions which are being offered is my next category. Warehousing. It's been decided to exempt prospectively, please note prospectively, services by way of storage or warehousing of cereals, pulses, fruits, nuts, vegetables, spices, copra, sugarcane, jaggery, raw vegetable fibers such as cotton, flax, jute, etc., indigo, unmanufactured tobacco, betel leaves, tendu leaves, rice, coffee, and tea. So exemption for warehousing of these products prospectively. Transportation. To increase the validity of conditional exemption of GST on export freight by air or sea by another year. It exists already. We are extending till September 2020. Insurance. To exempt Bangla Sashya Bima, BSB, crop insurance scheme of West Bengal government. To exempt services of life insurance business provided on or agreed to be provided by the Central Armed Paramilitary Forces under Ministry of Home Affairs group insurance funds to their members under the respective group insurance schemes of these Central Armed Paramilitary Forces. The next here, again, export promotion. So the exemptions which are being provided for service-related matters for export promotion are three. One, to exempt services provided by an intermediary to a supplier of goods or recipient of goods when both the supplier and recipient are located outside the taxable territory. That's being exempted. Second exemption, to issue a notification under section 13 of IGST Act notifying the place of supply of specified R&D services. What are they? Such as integrated discovery and development, evaluation of efficacy of new chemical and biological entities in animal models of disease, evaluation of biological activity of novel chemical, biological entities in vitro assays, drug metabolism and pharmacokinetics of new chemical entities, safety assessment, toxology, stability studies, bioequivalence, bioavailability studies, clinical trials, bioanalytical studies. All of them come under that broad category of R&D services. So we have given a notification under section 13 of IGST Act notifying the place of supply of specified R&D products. Provided by, and these are provided by Indian pharma companies to foreign service recipients as the place of effective use and enjoyment of a service, that is location of the service recipient. So that is for export promotion, particularly from the R&D areas. For export promotion, the GST Council decided to clarify that the place of supply of chip design software, R&D services provided by Indian companies to foreign clients by using sample test kits in India is the location of the service recipient, and again under section 13(a) of IGST Act 2017 is not applicable for determining the place of supply in such cases. So that's all about export promotion related to services. I go to the miscellaneous category. The Council decided to allow the registered authors an option, registered authors, book writers and so on. So to allow the registered authors an option to pay GST on royalty charged from publishers under forward charge and observe regular GST compliance. For book writers and authors, this is now being extended on an optional basis. Those authors who want to use, those registered authors who want to use an option to pay GST, they don't want an exemption, to pay GST on royalty charged from publishers under forward charge and observe regular GST compliance. Next is to notify grant of liquor license by state governments against payment of license fee as a no supply to remove implementational ambiguity on the subject. So it will be treated as no supply. Then next is to exempt services related to FIFA, which I've already read out, under 17 Women's World Cup 2020, similar to existing exemption given under FIFA under 17 World Cup 2017. The goods was read out earlier, now I'm reading the services. The next category, which is not very many more, rationalization, trade facilitation measures to allow payment of GST on securities lending service under reverse charge mechanism at the merit rate of 18% to clarify that GST on securities lending service for period prior to the RCM period, which is the reverse charge mechanism period, shall be paid on forward charge basis. IGST shall be payable on supply of these services, and in cases where CGST, SGST or UTGST have been paid, such taxpayers will not be required to pay tax again. So that's a clarification. The last point under this category, is to allow reverse charge mechanism to suppliers paying GST at 5% on renting of vehicles from registered person other than body corporates, LLPs and proprietorship, when services provided to body corporate entities. So I'll read this again. To allow the reverse charge mechanism to suppliers paying GST at 5% on renting of vehicles from registered persons other than those which are body corporates, which is like LLPs and proprietorship, when services provided to body corporate entities, when they provided for the body corporates. Just last two clarifications. The Council decided to clarify the scope of the entry, services of exploration, mining or drilling of petroleum crude or natural gas or both. There was also a decision related to that. So they have tried to clarify the scope of entry under this category. The Council also has decided to clarify taxability of passenger service fee, PSF, and user development fee, which is UDF, levied by airport operators. The Council, I'm repeating that point, the Council has also decided to clarify taxability of passenger service fee, PSF, and user development fee, UDF, levied by airport operators. So now it is proposed that these notifications, to issue these notifications giving effect to these recommendations of the Council on 1st October 2019. So those are the set of decisions. I'll leave it to the Secretary to add many more. There's also a press release based on the Council's reviews.
The Council has also today took a decision.
Yes. If you kindly excuse me, my flight is at 10 o'clock back to Delhi. I'll have to rush to the airport. I'll leave it to the Secretary to give you any clarifications. Thank you.
To waive the requirement of filing annual return for the composition dealer.
We just heard Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman announcing a slew of rate cuts with respect to some of the items under GST. There have also been increase in the GST applicable for aided to drink makers. We have Ritesh Kanodia with us, joining us on the phone line. Ritesh, broadly, the GST meeting today was around either rate increases or decreases. Were you hopeful of any other major announcements that the industry was looking forward to?
Yeah. So, what was actually, so while the rate cuts are a welcome step in terms of, what has been done qua the rate. So, for example, the luxury hotel industry or, for example, outdoor catering, etc. I think what we missed today was a slew of clarifications which were to come from the GST Council. So there were certain circulars which were issued in the past in the context of discounts being offered to the industry or in the context of intermediary services, and which circulars have created a lot of problem for the industry. And it was expected and hopeful that, some of these circulars probably would be addressed or probably would be withdrawn. However, and considering that now we are going to see a slew of such discounts being given considering Diwali, and so for example, on the context of intermediary services, refunds are being held up to say that these are not considered as export and therefore they cannot be considered as, so therefore refund would not be available. So, that was an expectation which was there that, today those resolutions would be achieved. However, we've not seen them happening.
Ritesh, could you also elaborate on what is the clarity required from the GST Council in terms of the discounts, the GST applicable on discounts? Because I believe there was a circular earlier where the council had clarified the incidence of the indirect tax on freebies and discounts, right?
Yeah. So basically, what the circular says is that, and this is with respect to discounts that are offered after the sales have been made. So not on the face of the invoice, but later on by way of an issue of credit note. So there are certain conditions which need to be fulfilled in order that the discounts would be subject to GST adjustment. So the circular has clarified that if a discount has been offered later on with an intent for that the dealer or the distributor carries out a specific activity to avail that discount. So for example, he does promotion marketing, he does run certain schemes for the manufacturer, then that discount is nothing but a service provided by dealer or distributor to the manufacturer and therefore liable to GST.
Okay.
So in fact, in a transaction the transaction is actually a sale between a manufacturer and a dealer and distributor. However, they've said this transaction has another service element, which is by a dealer or distributor to the manufacturer. So that was one issue. The second issue was with respect to, discounts being offered to be passed on to the consumer. And this was a far more troubling issue for the industry. So what they've said is that, if manufacturer gives a discount to the distributor or dealer to be passed on to the consumer. So let's say a 100 rupee product is sold by the manufacturer distributor to a dealer, and then the manufacturer gives a 10 rupee discount, and the dealer sells that at 90 rupee to the consumer. For GST purposes, the value would be 90, which you receive from the consumer, and 10 the discount that you receive from the manufacturer. So you have to still pay GST on 100, whereas the sale price is only 90.
Sure, these are important things which the GST Council, hasn't seemed to touch upon. But I do want to come back to the rate discussion, Ritesh, that GST Council meeting after meeting, we see the tinkering of rates. So should we just get used to the idea that every GST Council meeting they'll be tinkering based on what sector is demanding what, and then those respective adjustments will need to be made?
Yeah, you're right. So what is happening is, there has been quite a frequent number of rate changes happening, and I think there needs to be a realization that, there is no stability which is to be seen. So today, for example, there is something at 18 which would go to 12, something at 12 which would go to 5. So the entire business planning, goes for. So while we've seen a lot of rate reductions, so clearly this is representation by the industry to say that, bring me at a lower rate. And most of these rate reductions are probably pursuant to, the fact that they are at some disadvantage. So aerated beverages, for example, the rate was taken up to 28% to bring in line with carbonated drinks like Pepsi and Coke. So those beverages were getting an advantage. Hotel industry, yes, the intent was to promote the hotel industry. So probably that was the logic and reasoning. And if you have heard Mrs. Sitharaman, she said that we went beyond what was thought of with respect to the hotel industry after a presentation by the Goa minister. So that could be one of the reasons or rationales of doing this change. Outdoor catering, for example, the 5% rate, so it brings the entire food sector, so restaurants, etc., at 5%. So that's again sort of rate parity.
Ritesh, I also have Jigar Doshi of SKP with me, and I'm going to read out some of the sort of procedural changes that the GST Council has notified via press release. They have relaxed the filing of annual returns for MSMEs for financial year 17-18 and 18-19. And this relaxation includes waiver of the requirement of filing Form GSTR 9A for composition taxpayers. And for GSTR 9 for those taxpayers who have an aggregate turnover of up to 2 crores, that has been made optional. Jigar, you want to weigh in on sort of how will it help or rather ease the procedural requirements for small businesses?
Yes. You hear me, Paswini?
I can, yes.
Okay. So, yes, it is one of the important aspects and expected amendment or other change that the council has brought in. It is going to bring in good amount of relaxation for decent amount of assessees, because majority or not majority, but decent amount of assessees were sitting in this bracket. Relaxation for the first years were obviously called for because extensions were coming in, and it was important for clarity to be given in that they are not going to focus on the first 2 years, because obviously the stabilization is required to be done, and the compliances are not that burdensome for the list of the assessees that we are talking about. Neither the government is going to lose their revenue, neither these kind of assessees would have any issues. So my perspective is that there is expected change. They have not done anything which is hurting the revenue, and compliances for such kind of assessees, if it is reduced, it is most preferred, because now the focus would run into MSMEs or little better than MSMEs.
Okay, Ritesh, this is an interesting one. They have said in order to nudge taxpayers to timely file their statement of outward supplies, imposition of restrictions on availment of input tax credit by the recipients in cases where details of outward supplies are not furnished by the suppliers in the statement under Section 37 of CGST Act. So this is to sort of, put pressure on your supplier to timely fill in the details so that the GST chain, goes on uninterrupted. Could you explain the implication of this development?
So maybe this, I have not read the provisions, but it seems that they are in line with the new return mechanism, where the thought process is that, once a supplier files his outward supply return, a recipient will have to go and accept that invoice before he can take credit. So there is a process of accept, reject, and keep it pending. So I would just take a step back to say that when GST law was introduced, this was always the contemplated thought to say that you would only get credit once the supplier files the return. And then there was a entire set of provisions for mismatch of credit. So GST at 2 versus 2A, you would have heard this a multiple number of times. But what happened was, because of the complexities around, filing of returns, etc., the entire 2A mechanism sort of was postponed. So when I say postponed, means it was not given due credence, and the recipients were able to take credit on the basis of invoice. Now they have made it very rigid to say that, sorry, now if supplier doesn't file the returns, you can't go and accept it because it is not visible online. If you can't accept it, there is no question of taking credit. So this was due to come in contemplation for quite some time.
But currently, does that system exist? Because I thought so far this matching sort of didn't come into the picture. Was I able to edit the value that my supplier has put in the system to be able to sort of match it with my information?
No, so it was as to how the provisions were laid down earlier. It never came into. It was only a theory.
Yeah.
It never came into reality because of the entire complexity of return filing, etc. So this was always as to how the system was supposed to function earlier. So there were provisions which said that if the supplier is not filing the return, you have to reverse the credit within X number of months, etc. So all these were never implemented in the first place.
So what is the purpose of sort of putting this out now then, if none of that was operationalized?
See, according to me, the major issue is evasion of taxes. So you must have heard about this entire saga going on fake invoices.
Right.
And the question is that if there is no matching concept, then how do you address this issue of fake invoices? So a supplier doesn't file the return, he issues invoices. A recipient takes credit and the supplier vanishes. Now that is not likely to happen, because once the supplier files the return, the recipient would only get credit once he accepts it. So it is actually his risk. And if he, assuming for a moment, goes ahead and makes payment to the supplier without looking at whether the supplier has filed the returns, he is at a GST loss, because the government will not grant him credit basis the invoice, and he would have already paid the amount to the supplier. So instead of government, now the owner shift to the recipient.
Okay, all right. Jigar, there are some sort of clarifications or rather changes related to job work services. They've reduced the rate of GST from 5 to 1.5% on supply of job work services in relation to diamonds, and from 18 to 12% on supply of machine job work to engineering industry. Again, this is to address the demand of the, let's say, the informal sector per se.
Personally, that question was for me or Ritesh?
That was for you, Jigar.
Okay, so again, this is the rate rationalization pathway, and this is all basis the calculation on basis which representations have been filed by these sectors. And the calculation was very straightforward that the input credits that these sectors were having were more than, blocked because of the output liabilities that they were having. And on the front where the cost sheets were showing blocked working capital for these, sectors. And most importantly, they wanted to boost the service sector, including the job working work guys, which earlier used to be, on the excise regime, exemptions were provided, etc. So they wanted to ensure that these sectors were also boosted because the data said that most or many job workers were shutting down their operations considering the competition as well as the tax, problems that they used to have from GST perspective. So to boost the sectors and to hear out the representation given by these sectors, the rate rationalization has been done, including all these hotels, outdoor, job working. So the perspective is very simple: to boost the sectors and to ensure the blocking of working capital is not done.
Okay, there are final three, so I'm not going to go into specific rates reductions now, because the ones that have gone up, it's bad for industry. The ones that have been reduced, they're going to celebrate. But there are three procedural changes that I would like your thoughts on. One is that they've said the new return system now to be introduced from April 2020. The earlier proposal was October 2019. In order to give opportunity to taxpayers as well as the system to adapt. The second one is they've said they're going to form a committee for the simplification of forms for annual return and reconciliation statement. So that seems to be an ongoing exercise. And finally, what they've said is extension of last date for filing of appeals against orders of appellate authority before the GST appellate tribunal, as the appellate tribunals are yet not functional. Ritesh, what do you see as the implications of these three sort of announcements?
So coming first to the returns, see again, so the concept of new returns is that now you have to file one return with a few annexures. Now doing that in the middle of the year was anyways going to be sort of onerous and cumbersome, because this would then require a lot of system adaptation and changes. So I think it is good that this is moved. And when you spoke about the credit mechanism, which is acceptance by the recipient, I think that would also probably come into play along with the new returns. I don't know. I'll have to read the fine print whether that has already been implemented or would that be implemented along with the new returns. But, start of financial year is always good for considering that, it's a new year and the changes could be then made to the system right from year one.
Right.
Sorry, what was the second point
I'll
you
take
mentioned?
I'll take this one to Jigar, Ritesh. Jigar, they have extended the last date for filing of appeals against orders of appellate authority before the GST appellate tribunal, since the appellate tribunals are yet not functional. Where were the sort of appeals going to, since the appellate tribunals are not functional, and whether taxpayers facing sort of problem in terms of appealing their decisions, and this comes as a relief then?
Yes. So personally, the fact is, what happened is under the law, the GST appellate tribunal were to be formed, and it only recently, last month, got formed, and the members have been started to get appointed across pan India. So the reason why this appeals due date has been extended is because, as per the law, if the due date is passed, the assessee will not have any right to appeal. And right now, various writ petitions were filed because there was no body to hear them at the appellate tribunal level from GST perspective. So they wanted to get rid of all these writ petitions, and they wanted to obviously give a principle of natural justice to all the assessees, because if the body is not functional, no one would be able to appeal. And now, because of the extended timelines of being available, things should fall in place. And anyways, the appellate tribunal is also being functional now.
All right, Ritesh, Jigar, I'll leave it here. Thank you for joining us with your first quick thoughts on the headlines coming out of the GST Council meet today. If you missed some part of the discussion, do go into bloombergquint.com. You'll find the whole discussion and the conversation there. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you soon.